Welcome to the Always On podcast. I'm your host, Duncan MacPherson. And on this podcast, our objective is to empower and enable our audience, which are very high caliber fee-for-service professionals, to always be working on their business and on themselves, personally and professionally. And on today's podcast, I had just an absolutely epic conversation with Sathya Chey Patterson. Sathya is a managing partner at Arise Private Wealth. She is a 2023 Forbes Top Women Wealth Advisor, a 2024 Advisor Hub Advisors to Watch, and just a shining example of how to become the advisor of the future. And what we talked about today was honoring her past, because she has a great story. We talked about how she is thriving in the present and what's working for her, and how she's designing the future for not just herself and her team, but for her clients and what's next for her in the next 5 years or so. And ultimately, the theme is making the American dream a reality. Again, just an absolutely great story. So hopefully you like it. If you do, please share and tell your colleagues. And of course, if you have any ideas for themes and topics in the future, just let us know. Thanks for listening. We cover a lot of ground on the Always On podcast. We bring on subject matter experts and thought leaders on a variety of different areas that impact the productivity and efficiency of a financial professional. But I have to say that my favorite conversation is with an actual financial advisor, because we're not talking in anything that's theoretical. We're talking in terms of expanded thinking beyond just technical ability, how to create professional contrast, professional scarcity, and all of it. And that's exactly what we're going to do on this call today. And even more so because of the uniqueness of my guest today, Sathya Chey Patterson. How are you doing? Thanks for being here.
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
I know you're a serious student of all things management, asset management, practice management, relationship management. I wanted to call this conversation Making the American Dream a Reality, because there's so much about your backstory that's compelling, what you're doing today. And in fact, what I'd like to do is break this conversation into 3 parts. I want you to tell your story so we can honor your past. I want you to talk about what's working now and what you're doing to be different and thrive in the present. And then I want to talk about designing the future. And there's a dual track to that as well, because it's not just your own business and your team, but also, of course, how you help your clients navigate through all the noise and uncertainty so they can feel good about the direction they're going. Let's get started. Can I first ask you about your story?
Yes. Definitely a unique story. And one, when we talk about what I'm doing now and how I set myself apart from the many wonderful financial advisors in the world, is my story and being authentic to who I am. So my story comes from all the way across the world. I was born in a refugee camp in Thailand. My family survived the Cambodian genocide that occurred from 1975 to 79. It's odd because not many people are aware of it or know the details. Maybe they've heard of it, but they don't know the details. They don't know that 2 to 3 million people died, which different estimates say between about 40% of the population. And so we ended up in a refugee camp because in 1975, my mother was 23 at that time when the Khmer Rouge, the Communist Party, took over and basically went to all the homes and said, these years of civil wars are over. We've now taken power. And it had a lot to do with the destabilizing of the region after the Vietnamese War. And they took power. My father was a soldier at that time. He said on the walkie-talkie, he heard, we've lost. They've taken over. He said he stripped down, laid his AK down next to a river, stripped off of his army fatigues, and looked for civilian clothes because he had studied enough communist regimes where he knew he could in no way show that he was involved in the prior government. And he immediately took on this image and identity of an uneducated commoner with no money. And my mother at that time had 3 children, 5, 4, and a 4-month-old. And everyone had a long journey because you basically were told to take what you can carry from your homes in the cities and march into the rural areas of Cambodia where everyone was going to be a part of this beautiful utopia where you owned nothing and you were a part of this agrarian society. Everyone was going to be farmers and all of your needs would be met. And my mom, they walked for weeks. My mom says it's like a distance of walking from LA to San Diego. You just walked for weeks. And my mom at the time had a younger sister who was 18 in the middle of a blood transfusion. And they emptied all the hospitals. So if you could take your loved one out, you could. And she had to disconnect her little sister from in the middle of a blood transfusion and take her on this journey. And along the way, she did pass away from her illness, and she had leukemia. You can hear my backstory of resilience, the need to just be in survival mode. And most of my family, immediate family, survived that 4-year rule. My sisters were 5 and 4 when they were put into child labor camps and worked for 12 hours a day and were separated from my mother. You were allowed to spend time for a couple hours a week with your family. They really didn't want you to have a close connection with your family because your loyalty was to the government. So they limited the amount of time you were spent with your family. My father's father, they killed anyone with glasses. They killed anyone with an education. They killed anyone. And they would do things, and if you were foolish enough to say, when they said, is anyone a doctor here? We need a doctor. Was anyone a teacher? We need you for X or Y. And if you thought that would give you any favors, you were never heard from again. No one ever saw you again. And that my grandfather was a teacher, and his students became Khmer Rouge soldiers. So they knew. My father was told, you hear whispers through the camps, that his father was taken away and never seen from again. So can you imagine, my father at this time is in his early 20s, is hearing of his father being murdered and not being able to show any emotion behind it. So it was a very tough time for my family, of course, and very strange because you hear about the Holocaust so many generations ago, and there's most of the folks that lived through the Holocaust are not here anymore, but it's so close to me. My parents, my oldest sister, who is helping to take care of my son and is our nanny, she's only in her early 50s, mid 50s. This is something so recent that is so bewildering, but we all know it's happening in the world today, all around the world. And so there was many stories related to their life there in Cambodia and how they survived. My mother had a skill. She was a seamstress. And so she made herself useful by mending the soldiers' clothes and making backpacks for them. And so she was able to gain skill, gain food, because there was a lot of starvation at that time. If you weren't just killed, you were starved to death and worked to death. And then once the Khmer Rouge were overthrown in 1979 is when my family saw the government being put into place wasn't what they felt would lead the country to a place where they wanted to raise their children. And that's when we escaped and went to refugee camps along the Cambodia-Thai border, which was where I was born. And at that time, my mother and father had 2 young babies, myself and my brother. My mom's 3 children, her youngest sister and brother, and then her 3 nieces and nephews that were left behind by their parents. And I don't know, what is that, 13 people that were living in refugee camps. And so that was why we lived there for 4 years, because you had to put your name in a lottery to be picked to come to America or Canada or France, who were accepting refugees from war-torn countries. And we're so grateful for that. And because of the size of our group, it was really difficult for us to get a placement. But we did eventually get that placement in 1985 is when we came to this country. And my family immediately became entrepreneurs. They didn't have education. Neither of my parents graduated high school. They barely spoke the language. You had to pass a minimum level of English speaking language and a citizenship, how many stripes are in the flag type thing. But they came here and they gave you $100 for our family. And how we survived was we would go to trash cans outside of grocery stores and take the expired produce and meats and dented cans that they would throw away that regular Americans wouldn't purchase. And we made our meals with that. Most of our money went to where we were living to give us shelter. And then my parents did things like before my siblings were in middle and high school at this time. And before school at 4 a.m., we'd all get into a family, even me, baby in the car seat, would go to trash cans and get the cardboard and dented cans where they would use that to recycle and get money from the recycling for money. Then my mom eventually purchased a sewing machine with their savings. And then she began sewing clothes because that was a skill she had. Then they borrowed money from friends and family and opened one of the first Cambodian markets in Long Beach, which Long Beach has the largest population of Cambodians outside of Cambodia. And they became serial entrepreneurs and retired in their 50s. They have a portfolio of real estate, but most importantly, they're not multimillionaires, but they have much more than they'll ever need. And they have 2 children that went to college, and of us 5, and they were able to help many of us start our own businesses, or we handed off their businesses to us. And I've been working since I was 9 years old, since I could be helpful. So my resume is really deep and long. And I took over one of my family businesses when I was 20 years old. And I was in college, but also running a little market of ours. My life story has given me so much. It's a double-edged sword because some say I would lack a little empathy because of everything my family has been through, and yet they were able to persevere and create a beautiful, comfortable lives for themselves with little education. So I just think this country is amazing for the opportunities it has given my family. And I do believe in our future is in our hands. We control our destiny. And bad things happen to good people. And why did this happen to my family? Why were we born? Why weren't we born? Why wasn't my mom born in LA in 1950s and having a fun time? And why did she have to go through that? But we play the cards we're handed. And we can choose to live in a mindset of victimhood, or we can choose to change our story.
Sathya, holy heavy duty. I had some understanding, but thank you, by the way. And forgive my lack of knowledge. But when I was a young teenager, I remember in Canada, all this talk about what the media called boat people. Is that your community?
Yes, part of it, because it was also the Vietnamese refugees that came from the Vietnamese War. Yes.
And then the movie, The Killing Fields.
Very accurate. Very accurate based on, I believe it's based on a true story in terms of that plot, but everything that the movie depicted in terms of the soldiers and is very true. And Angelina Jolie also directed a movie called First They Killed My Father, based on an autobiography of a young girl who was very similar to my sister's age, that lived through the labor camps and was separated from her father, and very true to what happens. My sister says when the Khmer Rouge were kicked out in 1979, they started bombing the country. And she remembers running through the camps and just bombs and people exploding all around her. And she was probably 8 years old at this time, 8, 9 years old. and running for safety. On how no cell phones, no internet, my family all found each other is amazing. I don't even know how that was possible.
So you said, okay, a lot to absorb there. You said the window from 79 to 85.
75 to 79.
But you came to California in 85?
Correct. Yes.
So what does it look like for you between 79 and 85?
We were in refugee camps.
For 6 years?
We were in Cambodia for a year or so. And then we probably didn't go to the refugee camps until 80, 81. So we were in refugee camps about a little over 4 years.
Okay. And your comment about lacking empathy, it's not that you lack empathy, it's just not extreme empathy from the perspective of, because moderation for everything. I think what I'm saying is, I'm sure you take nothing for granted in life, nothing. And you telling that story, does that transport you at all? Or have you told the story so often that it's now a story, or does it take you back when you just bring that up for us?
No, it still brings so much emotion. It is tough for me to talk about.
I appreciate it a lot.
And that was the Cliff Notes version.
No doubt. And I don't want to sort of park that and move on just with a little, but I have to tell you, one of my favorite quotes, C.S. Lewis said, "You don't have a soul, you are a soul, you have a body." And sometimes when I try to make sense of, I can't relate to that level of injustice and pain and suffering. I've got my own, most of it self-imposed through errors in judgment. But I guess what I'm saying is, I just hope that the reason you and your family went through that is for people like me to understand that for me to appreciate light, you have to understand dark. Like dark is the absence of light. And to appreciate warmth, you need to feel cold, and all of the contrasts in life. And I'm also going to assume, and you can correct me, but you probably carry a substantial degree of personal responsibility to honor everybody who didn't make it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I take a great amount of responsibility for everything myself and my family went through to ensure that everyone is living their life to the fullest. Because setting aside what my family went through, any of us, it's an absolute miracle that you in particular were born, that your great-grandfather met your great-grandmother. And it's an absolute miracle. And everyone, despite not having to go through that, should feel just as grateful for this life we have to live. And everyone has their role in life. And we know there's billionaires in the world or people that impact millions and your Tony Robbins of the world, but everyone has an ability to impact someone's life in a deep and meaningful way. And it doesn't need to be on a broad scale as others. And I think that is my purpose in life, to find and encourage that in anyone I meet.
Okay. So another favorite quote, just because I love sound bites. Mark Twain said the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you figure out why. What I want to talk about is a little bit about your sense of purpose and what fuels you. I'm also going to assume that utopian picture that was painted back in the day in the 70s of equality and shared riches, and that never happened, of course.
No. For the few people who ran the country, Pol Pot died in his sleep in his 80s or something. None of his comrades were brought to real justice, because a lot of the people that continue to run the country were prior Khmer Rouge soldiers. So there was always a conflict of interest there in prosecuting these people.
Okay, my perspective on that, and then we can move to the next phase here. But First of all, you said about a miracle. I read not long ago that somewhere around 100 billion people have been born. And it's hard, but it's true. It's hard to get your head around that as a number, but it's true. Every single one. It's still a miracle. But those bad actors, 80 years in the grand scheme of things, a blink of the eye. I would not want to be any part of that exit interview. You die in your sleep. It's painless. You had an 80-year run. What does that look like afterwards? I cannot imagine that's going to be very pleasant. But anyway, okay. Thank you. Very meaningful. But let's talk about what's going on now. Let's talk about what's working as a financial professional. Like you, when I met you, I could tell you had a big personality, a big brain, very innovative, hard worker, all of those qualities that are essential. But what are you doing now that is different from the pack, helps you stand out? What's working? Let's get into that.
Yeah, I think early on in my career, you try to blend in. That goes back to my childhood where I didn't really like my funny name that was different than everyone else, or my slanted eyes. I wanted to be blonde hair and blue-eyed and Tiffany. And I think as I've gotten older and further along in my career, I truly value the authenticity that I have as an advisor and my story. So what's been working for me has been really diving into that story and my past and how much and articulating to clients how much it drives my dedication to them, right? Because clients, they hire financial advisors. Maybe they're looking at how are you going to build your portfolio for me? But in the end, it's such a deep relationship of trust, because you won't always outperform the S&P 500 unless you allocated 100% of your portfolio. You're underperforming. But what I think the belief that your clients know you have their best interests at heart, that you're there for them when they need you, that you are constantly dedicating your time to educating yourself about legislation and market impacts that could impact them, that is only going to come if they see inside of you a deeper purpose of why you are doing what you're doing. So what's worked for me is articulating my story and why my gratitude for being alive, my experience seeing my parents build something from nothing, and why I focus on first helping my clients understand what exactly is your why around what you're trying to build for yourself and your family. Because if they don't truly understand why they are wanting to be, quote, wealthy or create this dollar number, in the end, it's fruitless. In the end, you're still in fear. In the end, you're still questioning, will you have enough? I think many financial advisors have those clients. You run the financial plan for them. Their probability of success is 99%, and yet they still struggle to spend money on themselves. I often tell my clients, well, you better fly first class, if not your kids are. And they still struggle with that. And I want to help my clients enjoy this life more fully in a prudent way. And that is having that authentic conversation about my money mindset and what's maybe affected me, my survival mentality. I still struggle with it, right? I still wash out my Ziploc bags and recycle my aluminum foil to my husband's frustration. But I am slowly learning to invest in myself and the things that make me happy and fill my cup so that I can be more present for the people in my life and my clients. That is really working for me. So being authentic, having those conversations around their money story, self-actualization and self-awareness is key to change. Until you know why you keep making those same choices. How many clients you get a 8% return when they're like, I could have gotten 10%. I could have gotten more. But why? If you meet all your financial goals, with 8%. Why is that not enough? Because there's that fear there. And understanding that and drawing attention to that reframes the conversation from, oh, now they're want to jump advisors or readjust the portfolio. Because often when clients say, I'm ready to take more risk, they mean they just want a higher return, but they're not really ready to take more risk.
I'm curious, in the spirit of facts tell, stories sell, by telling your story, does it encourage clients to open up a little bit more deeply about their own story?
Yes, absolutely. I often start my initial conversations with my clients with going deep with myself. I was a single mother. I struggled financially. I went through a separation and my family story. And like I said, I can't tell that story without getting emotional. But I tell them, you're going to be opening your kimono. So I should open mine too. And really be vulnerable with you. Because the only way that we can have a deep and meaningful conversation, the only way that I can really help you achieve what you need in the core of what you really want to be happy is by truly understanding that. And if an advisor is not getting deep like that, I believe you will run into the surface level conversations around performance, there's going to be administrative errors or whatnot. But again, if they truly believe that you have integrity, that you have their best interests in heart, that's that depth of relationship that helps create a lasting client-advisor relationship.
I'm glad you said that, because the chemistry that you build with a client by being transparent and forthright and giving them permission to open up about maybe some things that they've suppressed a little bit, that chemistry is key, but that's only one of the 5 C's in a meaningful long-term relationship. There's credentials, which I know you have and you take seriously. There's the consistency, and I'm not talking about performance. I'm talking about how you conduct yourself, client experience. There's the communication, your ability to articulate value so they understand it. And then there's the congruency, which means you do what you say. You would never ask a client to do something you wouldn't do yourself. So those 5 C's, I do want to delve into a little bit. I have to say, because you talk about the why, and I'm a student of history. I look at the last 100 years. They say there's been 100 million victims of various forms of tyranny. And Viktor Frankl wrote a great book on one meaningful episode. It's mind-boggling what a human is capable of doing to another human. Yeah. And I'm trying to figure out how is that even possible. But Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, he has such a profound, there's so much about that book. It's essential reading. But there's one statement he says, when you're clear on why you want to live, you can bear with pretty much any how. And that why and how dynamic, getting a client to appreciate how you move them towards financial independence, but tying it into why it's important to the client, that is the art and science. So the science of your technical ability, but the art being the bedside manner is so incredibly key. So let's talk a little bit about, I think the first time I met you was at a mastermind in San Diego.
Yes.
And I was dabbling a little bit of talking about technology, and you just chimed in and started talking about all the various forms of technology. But here's something that happened. I don't even know if you and I talked about this, because I said to myself, okay, she takes technology seriously, but then I realized that you understood that it's a means to an end. So let's first of all talk a little bit about the technology that you've embraced, and then I want to add some context to that at the end. So what's some of the technology you've embraced to create consistency and efficiency in your business? If you don't mind going there.
Yeah, we just migrated from Redtail to WealthBox CRM. I just found that the news feed that's on the homepage of WealthBox CRM helps us all to see what's going on in the team, conversations that are had throughout the day. It's your homepage. it saves a lot of time with entering notes because you can enter your call notes and your tasks right there from the home screen instead of first going to the client record and entering it from there. Saving clicks, right? Because we are doing so much for our clients. So we really need to be efficient with our time. And within WealthBox CRM, they do have a great opportunities and new client pipeline reports and ways to track existing client opportunities and new prospects, at what stage of the prospect cycle they're in, and then creating workflows to follow up with them to make sure none of those opportunities fall off your radar. They're tracking AUM and revenue growth. So from your team, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So we really pay respect to making sure we can track those things. Consistency is we're segmenting clients. We have our A, B, and C clients and making sure that it's not AUM based, but you use the attitude, advocacy. We follow that same Pareto principles in segmentation because an A client could be a $700,000 AUM client who is that center of influence within their family and friends that people constantly look to for a referral. And so we want to make sure that we're servicing those clients and giving them wow service. Wealthy people, when they're going to the Four Seasons, they're not impressed by the level of service they get. It's an expectation. To really impress those folks, you really need to go above and beyond. You need to be tracking their interests, sending them articles and books and things where they know you're thinking about them. They're not just another client. So the CRM is not only the CRM you use, but actually using it. It doesn't really matter which one you use. They all do the same thing. But making sure you're setting an expert within your team or just time yourself to fully utilize the capabilities of your CRM, to customize the client experience and keep it consistent. When we're onboarding a client, there's an onboarding workflow. They get this letter, they get this package, then after the assets transfer, they're getting a tour of their website, making sure they know how to access their accounts. Maybe they want to be paperless. Thinking ahead of the client and making it as seamless as possible is what gives that wow service and that consistency. We like in and out here in the States because it doesn't matter which in and out you go to. It's always the same great taste. And that's the level of service when an A client refers you a friend or family that they know that you're going to give their family or friend. And we're looking for constant touch points. We started using Holistic tax planning software. We've always done tax planning and looked at tax returns, but to have an output, a visual output that's tangible that we didn't have to invest to create is great. Being able to build scenarios when we're selling concentrated stock positions or tax loss harvesting or doing a Roth conversion or doing a qualified charitable distribution, being able to show a client based on their unique tax situation, the tax impact, and not just finger in the air saying it'll cost you about this much in taxes is really reassuring for them. I use ChatGPT and Gemini and that AI software a ton for creating content for social media, for follow-up for my clients. After every client meeting, we give a next steps email. I think that's very important because you have your warm conversation in the beginning. Every agenda with my clients starts with your top priorities. First and foremost, let's address what's been on your mind, what you want to make sure are addressed, because we have our standard compliance-related review items that we need to do. And then that follow-up email addresses those things. After an hour and a half conversation, sometimes clients leave and they're like, what did we talk about? And I use ChatGPT to help summarize my notes. Now, of course, I'm being mindful about privacy and not including account numbers, et cetera, and full names. But that's something that used to take me 45 minutes to concisely jot down because I also use Dragon transcription service to take my little scribble on my pad as I'm conversating to then I can just talk and say my notes. I take those transcription notes, put them into ChatGPT and say, summarize this with bullet points of what we discuss and what our next steps are. It makes it really clear to my administrative team, send this money out, do this. It's great. Once it's approved on LPL Financial's platform, I do want to utilize an AI note taker. There's one called Jump. And what is the? There's one other one that we were looking at as well that I'm blanking on the name.
Otter or Reed or?
No, it's financial advisor related.
I see.
It's specifically, I'm going to look it up right now.
Look that up. I'm just going to pounce on something. So right now you bookended. What's it called?
Zox, Z-O-C-K-S. The
Z-O-C-K-S.
two most popular ones are Jump AI and Zox, Z-O-C-K-S.
Industry specific?
Industry specific. And it's mind-blowing because the amount of time it will save advisors in preparing for meetings. I mean, you can type into what college does their kid go to? What was the youngest daughter's name? It'll search through all your prior notes and easily find that information because the CRMs are not quite as good as on that.
That's one of the things about chat. And what I want to say, your format using Dragon for the transcription, and you can be mindful about compliance with the way you feed it information.
Right.
And then porting that into chat starts to understand your style, your nuances. And so it's incremental. It's not a transactional one-off. So do you find that the outputs from chat based on what you're feeding it are actually sounding more and more like you as you go further? Yeah.
And you can even, after the output comes out, you can say, incorporate a little bit more about their vacation. Or I just take it and I modify it a little bit. Yeah. But something that used to take me 40 minutes to do is now 90 seconds. I'm pretty happy with the output that comes out. And so I'm able to then move on to doing deeper planning for other clients instead of spending
more sand in your hourglass, right?
Exactly.
Hey, if anybody from Wealthbox happens to be listening, you had better get Sathya to do a 90-second testimonial video to help advisors see this value through an advisor's lens, because you did a great job there, by the way.
Thank you.
And I'm going to assume also you talked about your workflows and your standard operating procedures. So you remember Always On with the FIT process, the onboarding process, the service model and segmented service matrix. So I'm assuming you're bringing that all to light, but also locking that down as intellectual property. It's all structured your way, right? It's the Sathya way.
Yes, we did trademark.
Arise Wealth way.
Yeah, we did trademark the prevailing formula.
Okay, nice.
Yes.
Okay, hold that thought for a second. I'm glad you said that. Wow. Hey, where did that come from?
Just a little birdie whispered that in my ear.
So good.
A little Canadian birdie.
Yeah. You know a guy. Okay. So you can see behind Sathya, she's branded her practice. Can you just move over a little bit?
Oh.
Other way. Yeah, there you go. Arise Private Wealth. To me, that's like the phoenix out of the ashes. That's like the butterfly from the cocoon. It's the emergence. Somebody moving towards the best version of themselves. Financial independence can fuel that in so many ways. I told you the first time you walked me through the brand of your practice, I said it's perfect. And it's a perfect representation based on you being part of that. But it's not the Sathya show. It's an enterprise, but it's congruent. It represents who you are, which I love. So then we talked about branding the process, the client-facing process, to help a client understand not what your value is exclusively, but what it does, how it puts all the pieces of the puzzle together. So I would love to hear you articulate why you landed on the prevailing formula and how you represent that to a client or a prospective client. Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah. Yes, you are putting me on the spot because we haven't worked out the details yet. But
okay, well, I'll help too. But I'd like to hear.
Well,
this is like a dry run.
Yes. the name Arise was born from this idea that, given my background, you can rise above your past. You can rise above the circumstances that were given to you. And all along our website, the word elevate, the word rising above, all of those action words that take us out of that victim mentality, that when I say lack empathy, because I do think we have the power to change our circumstances. And so the prevailing formula, I think, was fitting because it was all about that action of what is going to create the success that you want in life. And so our prevailing formula is a process that takes what you think you want to create for yourself and your family, documents it, creates a plan on how to execute it and make it a reality. And then we have a process and accountability method to and regular check-ins to make sure that dream becomes a reality. I always tell people that want to work with, say, a flat fee financial advisor, and we do flat fee financial planning. The planning portion is 1/3 of the way. The implementation, the formula with which you arrive at the reality you want to create, is 2/3 of it.
Okay, awesome. And I know it's still on the workbench, like it's still being refined and optimized, but I love it. And my 2 cents from just a position.
Get my pen and paper out.
We are recording this.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's true.
So I've always loved the position that it's not the wind, it's the set of the sail. Now, there are prevailing winds, and we want to harness those winds. But we need to tack, we need to adjust based on storms and things like that. Because again, you've heard me say, calm seas never produce a skilled sailor. You're a skilled sailor because of where you've come from, what you've overcome, but also because you're a student of the way the markets work. So prevailing, it's ultimately you want your clients to prevail, but something has to get them there based on cause and effect. I just love that. And then formula, I know you're a goals-based professional. We've already talked about the fact that you'd like to draw out from your clients what's important to them. Form is within the word formula. So formula implies, like you said, process. It's been thought through, but the family, occupation, recreation, and money components of a client's goals are such a big deal. And what I really like about what you've done, because of you as a messenger, your messaging, but also the professionalism, is that sweet spot between individualizing what it means to be goals-based, but also professionalizing it with a process. So you've got a process in place, but it's not square pegs, round holes. It's individualized based on the client's unique approach. That is such a huge element to amplify fee worthiness, to amplify advocacy. If you want to chime in at all a little bit about what it means to be goals-based and how you do that with the clients, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Again, those initial conversations and helping them say out loud their money story. I just had a client the other day, retired early in her early 50s, and had a fun first year of partying and enjoying her time off, but now is getting a little melancholy. I don't know what I'm doing with my life, and really struggling to spend money on herself. And she said to me, honestly, I don't think I deserve to spend money on myself. The other day, I wanted to spend $300 on a yoga, and you tell me I can spend it, but I feel like I'm not worth spending that money on myself. And I think being goals-based is understanding those stories that our clients have and articulating their investment performance, their financial plan, probability of success in a way that speaks to those money stories that clients have. And when my clients are saying, this is the life that I want to create, I want to be happy. I want to have a meaningful life and a purposeful life. I want to pay honor to all the hard work my parents created for me and the opportunities they created for me. And then when they say, I'm scared to spend money on myself, I reframe and say, does this accomplish the goals that you want for your life? And how are you really respecting them? Would they be happy that you are feeling this guilt? And I really encourage everyone to create a vision statement for their life. Because that is what, when the world distracts us, social media or our families or society's expectations of who we need to be and why we need to make this money. And I look at my life vision statement and it helps redirect my intention in what I spend money on and what I spend my time on so that I can always feel confident in that decision I'm making because it aligns with my life vision statement.
First of all, I love the hand in glove dynamic between helping a client really be clear on their purpose, but also giving them permission to savor their wins and actually make sure that life's not anticlimactic, but also the delayed gratification is not perpetual. Find that balance. Now, I put you on the spot. I'm going to put you on the spot again. So do you mind sharing your vision statement, your true north?
Yeah, sure. Now let me pull it up because I keep it handy all the time. I am dedicated to empowering others to create the life of their dreams and reach their fullest potential. By being a positive and loving influence on my family, friends, and community, I strive to make a lasting, meaningful impact in the lives around me. Achieving this vision requires that I invest deeply in myself, live authentically, and embody the very qualities of mindfulness, resilience, and compassion that I hope to inspire in others. With a commitment to continuous spiritual growth and enlightenment, I embrace each day as an opportunity to learn, evolve, and contribute to the greater good.
That's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
But being a coach, I think you got to punctuate it. I think you got to punctuate it and say, and I do all of this, I bring all of this to life with our prevailing formula. I know that's just a little forced, but I'm a coach. What can I do? I can't help myself. No, that's really good, Sathya. And again, you know what? You're living that in real time. This isn't even an aspiration. This is a code of conduct. It's part of your decorum right now.
And that's what I really encourage advisors do, because throughout my career, God, I don't know how many cobblers' children don't have shoes. How many advisors are building their own financial plans and reviewing those annually with their spouses? How many people are really practicing what they tell their clients to? I know many advisors that are living paycheck to paycheck. I know many advisors with concentrated stock, telling their clients to build diversified portfolios and then have a giant individual stock portfolio that they're gambling with.
That's why the mantra, pay yourself first, is so key. And it's not, there's so many currencies in life. There's so many motivations in life. But yeah, the congruency of I do what I say is absolutely key. And what's interesting, I've learned something about you because when I talk to advisors, I try to find out what motivates them. And for some, what motivates them is they're inspired by others. Others inspire them. For some other advisors, they want to prove someone wrong. They want, okay, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's inspired by others, prove someone wrong, or that dynamic of overcome. They don't want to be overcome by something. They want to overcome something that they've endured. I think you're a combination of, first of all, the overcome, but also there's a self-motivation in you. You're a student of, you're watching advisors, what to do, what not to do. You're looking at clients. There's examples and warnings in that category as well. So there's this composite of motivation that I think you pulled together here. Is that safe to say?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, let's wrap up with one last thing. Describe nirvana for Sathya and your team and your clients. What does the next 5 years look like for you? What are you designing? You're a lifelong planner. You're planning for your clients. You're planning for yourself and your community and your team and your family. What does it look like in the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years, I'd definitely like to add to my team. I want to find more advisors that have the same intention to impact the world the way that I do, and provide them an infrastructure to do that they don't have to rethink the wheel. Because
that is so huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
It is, because I do think there's great advisors that just can't quite implement what in their mind and hearts they want to do, because it's hard to build that infrastructure. Managing my clients and dealing with their situation is one thing, but building this bigger machine of consistency of service, of constantly educating ourselves about all the software and technology that we use and all the intricacies and using it to its full capabilities, that's a full-time job in itself. And I'm fortunate that I have the ability to multitask and just work ethic to do that. And I want to help others with that. So that definitely in the 5 years is growing my team and finding more people with that, more advisors with that intention.
I think you're going to be found by those people. Just the way you conduct yourself and you're active in the marketplace and within the industry. I don't want to oversimplify this either, but I think about the unmet need of your addressable audience from a B2B perspective. So you've already got the B2C, the business to client. You've cracked that code. You've got a great organic business. On the B2B, when your addressable audience becomes other advisors, the unmet need is they're going to be great people that have a natural synergy and commonality with you as people. But their gaps, the unmet need they're going to have is regarding, like you said, the infrastructure around their practice and the process. So your prevailing formula will be adopted and deployed by other advisors who don't have a process. And the Arise Private Wealth way, the playbook for how advisors can conduct themselves, will also be adopted. They can build out a fit process. They can build out an onboarding process. They can build a service model without reinventing the wheel. They'll just take yours and deploy it. And that's going to liberate them, because that's one thing I realized about you the first time I met you is technology is designed for consistency and efficiency, but also to liberate you to go deeper into what is proprietary. That's your business and your clients. Those are not commodities. Those are proprietary. And the more you invest into your business and your people, your clients, your team, and just find the efficiencies in the technical ability, that's where the plateau avoidance is achieved, but also the breakthroughs are achieved. And I know you're tracking in that direction beautifully. This has been incredible. Can you believe it? We've been talking for an hour already?
No.
Unreal. Any closing comments? This has been great, by the way. First of all, closing comments, and where could an advisor find you to get to know you a little bit better and maybe see where the synergies might be?
Yeah, closing comments, I would say definitely embodying what you are preaching to clients. And then we're going through that exercise of understanding your own money story. And what is in your process, you have an ideal life. I do that for myself, and I think your listeners should definitely take that time to do that. And what was your last question? How are they going to find me? So our website is Arise, ARISE, privatewealth.com. We have LinkedIn, we have Instagram, Facebook. I'm constantly writing in newsletters and different websites and things like that, because I'm very passionate about helping other advisors as well as clients. So yeah, contact me anytime.
That's what I love about first generation proteges that achieve a breakthrough, is that they understand the responsibility that they become a mentor to other proteges. I know you're very busy, like you, not only within your community at conferences, but you go to, did I remember correctly, you went to a Barron's conference not too long?
I'm going to the Barron's conference and speaking at it in December.
Oh,
about,
amazing. What's your topic?
The use of AI in my practice.
See, unreal. See, you're going to be found by advisors that want to stop trying to reinvent the wheel and want to be more efficient and more effective. Because you know what I find, Sathya? When I ask advisors about their pain points, like what causes them hassle and friction and grief, it's all the things they're not really good at or passionate about. When they can outsource that and go into the things that they're really excited about, they become more effective. And I think that's what's going to happen. You're going to attract that on a regular basis. Good luck at that conference. Thank you so much for all of your contributions here. And we're going to have you come back and especially talk about when you deploy the prevailing formula and how accountants and attorneys and clients and prospective clients respond to that positioning, because that's a huge point of differentiation. Awesome.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. Great job.
Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you for listening to Always On with Duncan MacPherson, where our objective is to enable professionals to always be working on their business and on themselves. Want to learn more about Duncan and his team? Visit ParetoSystems.com. Don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the hosts and/or guests, and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Pareto Systems. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.